started, let me make a couple of introductions here. And like I said at the beginning, if you weren't here a few minutes ago, everybody's muted on this webinar. I've done enough of these in the past that we've had, babies crying and dogs barking and toilets flushing and things that we don't really want to share with you. And so we're going to have everybody muted. If you have a question, you can, I can see your questions in the question window. And so feel free to put that in there. We'll take some questions at the end. You won't be able to see that, but I can see that, and that way you can communicate with me. Somebody on here is rooting for the Cardinals. That's just wrong. I'm a San Francisco Giants fan. But anyway, glad to have you with us today. All right, so welcome. And my name's Alan White. I have been in ministry for over 25 years. I have coached about 1,500 churches on their groups. In the last 5 years, I've helped churches start about 14,000 groups. I am a new author. I just turned in my manuscript on Friday. I guess that makes me a new author, doesn't it? And my book's going to be released in January, and you can find my blog where I pollute the internet over at alanwhite.org. Our speaker today is Doug Fields. Doug is the executive director of Homeward Center for Youth and Family at Azusa Pacific University. Doug, does that title fit on a business card? It seems, you'd have to have like an extra wide business card. Also, he is the co-founder of DownloadYouthMinistry.com. He has served on staff at Saddleback Church as well as South Coast Community Church, which is now Mariners, but he's also a teaching pastor at Mariners, so I guess he's come back around there. Doug is the author of over 50 books, and his blog is over at dougfields.com, and he is the co-author with his wife Kathy of Intentional Parenting. So if you guys would help me welcome Doug Fields. Glad to have you today, Doug.
Hey, thanks, Alan.
So how are things? Are you in California today?
I am in California. Just, it's early. I'm not a morning guy. Just ate my oatmeal. Over 50, got to eat your oatmeal, ready to go, excited.
There you go. Well, I'll be in California tomorrow, but not today. So that's how it goes. Well, I'm going to fire off some questions. Are you ready? And then these guys are all they're asking you some. We'll start with your questions. We're getting a lot of what's up and was up and all of that stuff. And then somebody asked, is Doug a Cardinals fan?
Oh, nah. I mean, if maybe there was against the Giants, maybe yes, but other than that, no.
So you must be a Dodgers fan.
Well, more than a Giants fan, that's for sure.
Oh, man. Well, I was, back when they had Ozzie Smith on the Cardinals, I would cheer for Ozzie even if they were playing the Giants, but that was an exception. That's not something that, I want to confess all the time. All right, so let's get into some questions here. So most people on the webinar today, they know you from your ministry at Saddleback, from Homeward, from South Coast, way back when. So let's start off with the easy questions. Do you actually have a family? And if so, how old are your kids and how many are still in prison?
Yeah, it's a good question. I've actually got three biological kids who did very well in the foster care program. So three biological kids, 27. She's a youth pastor at Mariners, where I started my ministry. Actually, she started 30 years to the day that I started there. 24-year-old son.
That's crazy.
Both my older kids are married, and then I have a 21-year-old who is a junior in college. And Kathy and I have kind of adopted those that have been with us since junior high that are both 27, and we're not officially adopted, but we have taken them into our family, and they got kind of wacky parenting and no parent situation. So we call them family. So I have three biological and two extended.
There you go. And to me, it seems like it would be easier to write a parenting book if you didn't have any children.
Well, yeah, I tell people all the time I wasn't, and then I had children. And then when they became teenagers, I became the dumbest human on the planet. And now that they're all in their 20s, I'm I'm redeemed a little bit. So
There you go. Well, I am still in the thick of it. I have a 14-year-old, a 10-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 2.5-year-old.
oh wow, so
Yeah,
okay.
and I'm a young 51. So there you go.
Yeah.
So three boys and a girl. The girl is 8. So I need all the parenting advice that I can take. I just have to keep intentional parenting away from my children so that they don't know how to undermine me knowing what I'm going for. So,
Exactly. Oh, Dad, you're just doing that because you read it in the book.
but it was funny when he was sitting on the toilet. That's what they would say. So they've seen your preview, so I think they know what I'm talking about. If not, go look at the preview. It is PG, so you're going to be
Yeah.
okay, even if he is in the bathroom there. All right, so in intentional parenting, you talk quite a bit about quick fix parenting. So what is quick fix parenting, and how do you say that? Now, and where does quick fix parenting fall short?
Well, quick fix parenting is usually parenting for compliance rather than guidance. So, quick fix parenting is yelling, and yelling, it usually gets immediate results, but it's not effective long term. Research points out that yelling produces rebellion and antisocial behavior, and actually increases more anger in a child. So quick fix parenting is just anything that is short term that stops the behavior but doesn't help the child long term. So it's really parenting without a plan. And that's kind of, Alan, that's the big deal with intentional parenting, is realizing that most parents don't have a clue of where to start, what to do. We have found this messaging to be really effective because parents are looking for help and hope, and just give me something that I can put into play this week that will work. And so that's kind of the big picture of not only quick fix parenting, but intentional.
Well, I find too, I'll make my own admission here that if I haven't thought ahead as far as what I'm going to do in a situation or have those tools in my toolbox,
Yeah.
I tend to default, and the things that come out of my mouth are things that came from my parents. So now I'm going to get you to here's your Oprah question. So tell us about the family that you grew up in. How intentional were your parents? And if you need to, just feel free to cry a little bit.
Yeah, there you go. Well, yeah, yeah, they're not the family system that's going to make me cry. But my parents were reactive parents. They didn't know any better. They never read a book on parenting. Never went to a workshop. Didn't even come to faith till I was in high school. So they really had no clue what they were doing. And although they made many great attempts, the reality is you can learn good parenting from bad parenting, just like those of us that have worked in the church. We can learn good leadership from bad leadership. I've worked for bad leaders before and went, okay, I'm not gonna. Yeah, my parents, they were fine and great, just not intentional.
Yeah, and I think
therapy bills have helped me deal with a lot of that. So
there you go. Well, and I think just different generations too makes a big difference. Now, I've noticed one thing as I was reviewing. I've had the actually privilege of looking at all the sessions of intentional parenting. I like that it's fast paced. I like that the video is very fast moving. I can definitely see where the curriculum would appeal to the guys, but it's not going to leave the ladies out, not exclude them in any way. How have you seen these materials so far? I know this is pretty new, but how have you seen intentional parenting engage fathers in particular?
Well, I think most people that watch it are blown away by the video quality. So videos are short; they're just 5, 7 to 8 minute videos. If you wanted to go further, there's videos of Kathy and I sitting around the table unpacking some of the print. Okay, Christians did not create these videos, so what secular movie studio did you work with? Because it's probably the best stuff I've ever been a part of and I've ever seen. So my style, whether I'm speaking of marriage or parenting, is to go after the guy. I feel like if I can win the guy, his wife is going to come along pretty easily anyway. So that was part of the style, the humor, it's not talking head. And then the workbook instead of the book, as we know, most people don't read books. Men typically don't buy books, but they might consider going through a workbook because it something to fill in. Maybe their wife will talk them into going through it with them. But yeah, we found it to be very guy friendly. But at the end of the day, women usually make decisions on parenting content and workshops and small groups and seminars.
Yeah, no, and I think it's a good format. And then there's a discussion guide that goes along with it to use in a class, to use in a group, would be very, very handy. But yeah, you guys, I mean, you pack a lot into just a few minutes of teaching, and I mean, it is. I can't. Just a curious question: how long did it take you to shoot?
Well, I went to Atlanta for an entire week, and we shot 12 hours every day, so 60 hours of shooting, and then they worked on it. They say Atlanta's the new Hollywood, and so there's a bunch of filmmakers out there, and this guy actually took a series that I did on intentional parenting. And he wrote, I just get to be the eye candy in the video. I don't get any creative credit.
and we're pleased to, experience your humility in your statements.
There you go.
So,
right.
And you've already got an invitation to lunch from a member of the audience. So Atlanta would be the new Hollywood with boiled peanuts. I think that's how that goes. I do live in Greenville, South Carolina. I grew up in Kansas, so I don't have this colorful accent or anything, but that's how it goes. I'm going to put the 10 actions up on the screen, and I think you're probably familiar with these. But just for our audience, just what I like about this is it's almost like if you don't do anything else, get to these 10 things. And so, and these are all listed in the curriculum. I just got rid of them for a minute. Strong belief, a 24/7 role model, encouraging words, genuine affection, consistent presence, a peaceful home, delicate discipline. Where was that one when I was a kid? That's what I want to know. Activate responsibility, positive memories, and serious fun. So, just kind of in a nutshell, and maybe this isn't a great question, but how did you arrive at these 10? So that if parents are going to do anything else, do these 10, and your kids are going to turn out, in a decent way.
Well, we were youth several years before we had kids. So, I always say that working with teenagers was our primary form of birth control. And what we did is Kathy and I really observed great families. We observed whacked out families, and we just started taking notes. I was actually in seminary, and we were talking about business and saying in business you begin with the end in mind. So your exit plan, your exit strategy, and I just always hung on to that phrase, begin with the end in mind. And so what Kathy and I did is we watched all these families, and we just said, okay, we have 936 weeks from the time our child is born to the time they're going to graduate high school. And in those 936 weeks, what is it that we need? What we want them as best as we can do? We obviously there's mystery to all of this, but the best that we can do. What do we want our kids to look like when they graduate? And we came up with your typical list of wanting them to be people of character, but we wanted them to have convictions and beliefs. We wanted them to be, they grew up in rich orange side of the world. We wanted them to have confidence, not arrogance, but a real sense of who they are and whose they are. And then ultimately we wanted them to have competence. And so Kathy and I, the object of our prayers, they became our target. And then we began to say, what are the investments that we're going to have to put into them to kind of ensure, as best as we can do as parents, we do the possible, obviously with faith that, God does the impossible. And we began to just see, one, we have to believe that we are the greatest influence in a parent's life or in a kid's life. And that's where I think most parents, they believe culture or media or peers has the greatest influence in their life, but also, so that's strong belief. Then role modeling, it doesn't matter what you say, they watch your life, you're constantly on display, you're under surveillance. Encouraging words is kind of a no-brainer, but it's not when I always tell parents, if I could put a recording device in your home, what kind of words would come out of your mouth? How many are positive versus how many are negative? Affection. One of our adopted kids, they just had a preemie baby, 12 weeks early, 1 ounce was born. And the day the baby was born, it looked like a little hamster. But the day it was born, they began to put it on not only mom's body, but dad's body as well. So dad has to take his shirt off, lay the hamster on his body. Just this whole idea of, we know that kids need skin hunger and appropriate affection. What does that look like? What happens when they get into middle school and they're weird and they don't want you to hug? You go on and on through all of them, but we just came up with, these are the biggies. We put serious fun number 10, not because we think it's the least important. We thought most Christian parents would go, serious fun, what are you talking about? But I would probably, if I had to rank that more toward the front third, because today's kids are so stressed out. And part of the reasons they're stressed out is because the insecure parents that put all this pressure on them to succeed. So we're talking about, what does it look like for kids to have fun and memories? So anyway, we came up with the list based on watching kids and going, this is what meeting needs of parents does.
Yeah, no, that's good. And what I like about this is it isn't over the top. Like, positive memories, it isn't, go to Disneyland every day. It's more of, sometimes it's the stupid things. Sometimes it's the trip that didn't work out. Sometimes it's the flat tire at the side of the road and you do something to keep everybody entertained until AAA shows up. And so they're doable.
Right. Well, as parents, we're making memories every day anyway. It's just whether at the end of the day, when the whole narrative is told, after 18 years, are they going to be good memories or, negative memories? And we're all going to have negative memories, but being intentional of like, hey, the first day of school, we always did this. The last day of school, on birthdays, we did this. On Flag Day, Dad dressed up in a flag, just a flag. Whatever it is, it's creating those memories that I think all of these, you can start somewhere.
And I never would have considered Flag Day, honestly, and it's coming up in June. So there you go. I know even last night my son walked through, and my 14-year-old, and I thought he was saying something hateful to me, and so I did a little quick fix bark at him, to be honest. And he walked on through, and my wife said he was trying to be funny. And I'm like, that's not funny. And it's like, well, it would be funny if he was me. And it was like, oh, he's like me. Now I get it. Now, somebody in the audience is asking about how intentional parenting has worked with single parents.
Yeah, well, one of the reasons we started this is I was at my gym about 3 years ago, and this single mom came up to me and she said, I don't understand, you saved my life. And I said, I'm just a little bit taken aback. And she went on to tell her story that she had heard me speak at Saddleback, and one of the things I said at Saddleback is single parents are my heroes. And I talk a lot about single parenting in here and how difficult this is. I think parenting is difficult when you have a good marriage. But the idea with single parents here is I'm always giving them grace, always saying, start somewhere, something is better than nothing. The idea at the end of this is not for parents to go, oh, look at all these things that we're not doing. And if we really loved our kids, maybe we'd give them up for adoption. That's not the idea of this, but it's to give them hope. And single parents can grab on to these just as effectively as married couples.
Now, Doug, some parents, this may be new to them. Their kids are getting into high school. They're just months to years away from leaving the house. Is it too late to start? Is it too little too late? Or what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I'm an optimist. I don't ever think it's too little too late. I think a lot of parents like to make excuses about that. Oh, look, my kids, when my parents died, I was 45 when my dad died, 50 when my mom died, just not too long ago. And at the end of their lives, you know what I wanted? I wanted more lives. I mean, a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about, I wanted as an adult from my parents. And, so I tell parents, teachers, grandparents, mentors, coaches, anybody that comes to my workshops on this or in a sermon series, it's not just parents. It is grandparents. grandparents are so crucial in raising kids these days. So it's never, to answer your question, it's never too late to start any of these. I think we're all dying for our parents to show up in our lives regardless of our age.
So when the parents come home, they've got the workbook under their arms, kids roll their eyes, here we go. All right, I'm going to put the 10 actions back up because I'm going to ask you a personal question. Which of these 10 was hardest for you?
Well, I would say early on, the delicate discipline was early when my kids were little, because I went into my script and parented the way that I was parented. And so I was probably, my wife would say that I was probably a little too reactionary. I would yell a little too much at the beginning, just behind all of this. I've written over 50 books, and this is her first one to touch. And it's probably the most important one we've ever done. But I tell people if parenting was high school, so she's really helped me in a lot of these areas. But I would say early on when my kids were little, I probably relied on quick fix parenting too much. And, the constant challenge being in two of the largest churches in the country, there was, I was always battling time and busyness and presence. And so I think I did a pretty good job of that. I coached all my kids. I didn't miss games. Sometimes because it was a large church, I could sneak out and people wouldn't know. I think regardless of how good you are at that, you always in the back of your mind are thinking, I could be better.
No, that makes sense. Now, somebody in the audience is asking, says, as a dad of 2 girls under 4, he says he became fearful in not knowing how to be emotionally present. And then he asks, what does that even mean? Yeah.
Emotionally present? Well, I think it probably,
Okay.
I don't know what emotionally present means. I talk about consistent presence. And, when kids are little like that, you don't think there's much payoff for it. In one of the videos, we have a little vignette of a dad reading a book to a little kid and skipping the pages, which every dad can relate. Yeah, but, I think presence is, and all through parenting. I'm just finding now with my kids in their, 27, 24, 21, they're really just kind of beginning to thank us for the intentional parents that we were. It wasn't until my oldest went away to college and would come back at breaks and go, oh, mom and dad, everybody's messed up. I can't believe I came from a pretty decent family, because they get into a different world and begin to see, the landscape is so family-wise. So,
yeah, that makes sense. All right, well, I'm going to encourage the audience in the question box. If you have questions for Doug, go ahead and begin to type those in. I've just got a couple more questions, Doug, and then we'll hear from, it'll be the bonus round or double Jeopardy. I don't know how we're going to do this, but anyway. So if you guys have questions, go ahead and put them in. So my next question is this. What's the difficulty factor in unlearning quick fix parenting and learning intentional parenting?
Well, like anything, we're all in a script. And in that script, we tend to run in our lane that we're comfortable with. And so anytime you throw a hurdle, and one of the hurdles is, one of the things I try to do is I try to show the downfall of kind of the juxtaposition of all of these. What does it look like to not be a present parent? What does it look like to be a discouraging parent? So, for example, I'll say things like, parents, your words can actually shape the behavior of a child. For example, you've seen this, every mom, not every mom, but she's shy. As Amy cowers behind mom's legs because she's heard that descriptive word, a million times. Or this is my wild child, Carlos, as Carlos lets out a demonic laugh and lights a tree on fire. So there's words that are, that shape and are powerful. So what I try to do in this is show kind of the road that many of us have been going down and how ineffective it is, and then just paint a new lane right next to it and say you're probably going to run in both of these lanes for a while until this one becomes more comfortable, you see the effects of it, the benefits of it, then you're going to leave that old lane and you're going to just migrate onto this new lane.
No, that makes sense. Now, would you recommend for parents to, take on all 10 at once, or what does this look like? Trying on a couple as you go, or?
Yeah, the first, the beginning of the workbook, we just talk about beginning with the end in mind, and I walk through the 5 C's of competence and compassion and character and conviction. So start there. That's important. Just getting parents to stop and think a little bit. Some of these you're going to rate higher than others, but pick a weakness. So if you're always just, on your kids and negative and not encouraging, then why don't you just start there and just start working on that and start being encouraging. The idea isn't for you to read the book and then gather the kids in the living room and say, we're intentional and we're going to be encouraging and we're going to hug and we're going to do these different things. But it's kind of just opening up that new lane and saying, these are some areas that I want to begin to work in this. When parents go through this, I would say that some of them go, oh, we're doing a lot of this, that. Mm-hmm. But it can always be tweaked. And then if you get some parents, like I know you're going to talk about the small group piece afterwards, but one of the ways that I think this content can be used is some parents that are actually doing a pretty good job, not perfect. There's no such thing as a perfect parent, but parents that are doing a pretty good job that would then go alongside another parent and say, hey, let's go through this material together. So they kind of mentor them
now,
through it.
What would you say to a parent that their child has special needs, they're on the autism spectrum, ADHD? I mean, you've worked with a lot of kids, and it seems like diagnoses kind of run the gamut. When you look at these 10, do they apply the same? Do they apply differently? What's been your experience there? Yeah.
There's your fastball tough question of the day right there. That really makes me more of a St. Louis fan than a Giants fan. Okay. I don't know, Alan. It's kind of like why I don't do a lot of speaking internationally, because I can barely exegete American culture, let alone international culture. I can barely think about kids with special needs and figuring out what to do with them. I think people with kids with special needs are in a whole different category. It doesn't mean that they couldn't look at these and go, oh yes, these would apply, and affection, I just don't pretend to be
boys that have some special needs. And, on the one hand, you don't let them get away with murder, but on the other hand, sometimes you have a little bit of flexibility there. But, in looking at the principles or the actions myself, it's like it has a lot of it really has to do with my actions instead of their actions. And so, for me, I can be a better parent regardless. And then what hits is great. And sorry to throw you the curveball there, but
exactly. No, and actually just we have some friends with some special needs kids, and we love on them. The youth worker in me always comes out when I'm around them, and I pay more attention to them than I do the parents. But as we drive home, there's often times when I'll say to Kathy, like, boy, I can't even imagine how difficult
it can be a challenge. We know a lot of different families, but obviously there's hope. There's ways to guide your kids, and they're going to live their life, and and the special needs becomes your new normal, and you just work within that. A couple questions from the audience here. One from Tracy says, my struggles have been the same too, as you mentioned, delicate discipline and presence. My granddaughter, we have custody, is 7. After lots of conversation and some counseling, we're doing much better. However, is confession necessary? Is it recommended? Do we at some point set her down and apologize for past mistakes?
Yeah, well, I think confession, goes to role modeling. So I would hang that under the umbrella of role modeling. One of the things that you want to role model is you're not a perfect parent or grandparent. So, there have been times when I've, had to sit kids down too many times and apologize. And because I'm a little bit of a baby, I start crying, or I get, a little tender. And, my kids, I'm sorry, I overreacted in that situation, or I didn't trust you, or whatever. And it was about me. It was not about you. Those are difficult actions for parents to. But I think when it comes to role modeling, is so important for them to understand that, my dad's on a journey, and I'm watching him, watching everything that he does. I'm watching what he says, how he thinks, how he treats people, how he treats my mom, how he gives at the church, how he embraces strangers. I mean, they're watching and so, yeah, I think confession is a real important part of it. Now, we could be screwing up as parents every day, and so pulling your kid aside every day and telling them, what you need to confess may not, they'd be like, I know, you say it every day, you're not a perfect parent. But I think there are times when you need to go, I blew that, and I want to ask for your forgiveness.
Yeah, no, and I think that's important because we're also teaching them that one day they're going to be parents. They're not going to be perfect. They don't have to feel like, oh, I have to be perfect or I've damaged my child forever. But to know that, I mean, even as a parent, when you are imperfect, you love your child enough to say, hey, I blew it. I made a mistake. I shouldn't have talked to you like that. I shouldn't have fed you 150 cookies or anything else like that. All right, Jerry. And by the way, Jerry said amen to your words to parents with special needs, by the way. He says, what's your top advice to parents with a new college student who's struggling with responsible decisions in light of their new independence or freedom?
Yeah. I mean, this is why I want parents to get this material when their kids are young. Because, responsibility, one of the 10 actions is activate responsibility. And, we oftentimes think responsibility is genetic, and it's not. I mean, if your kids are irresponsible, you got to teach responsibility. And the reason I combined it with delicate discipline is because I think delicate discipline actually leads to responsible kids. And when kids are given consequences, it actually builds self-esteem, because when kids have consequences, that they have power over their decisions. So they go, oh, I'm the one that actually chose that. So if my college-age student, whatever the consequence is, let's just say they're living at home for the summer, and whether you want to or not, you put a curfew on at midnight, and they come in at 12:30 or whatever. I don't know. That may be too, if you're there in college, maybe you don't need a curfew, but track with me for a second. Let's say they're in high school and, they're late for curfew. I don't have to posture, like shame them. I don't have to yell at them. I don't have to berate them. I can actually stand with them. So it's me and my child against the consequence, and say, baby, I'm sorry that now that you're late, you're going to have to be in the next 3 Friday nights with mom and dad, So when we give kids, and part of building responsibility is giving them choice and consequence, it empowers them to be adults. And, any parent needs to just Google delayed adolescence, and you see that adolescence is changing. The age of marriage has gone from 22 to 28. You've talked to young women in their 20s, they say there are no men. Why? Because we've got this whole generation of helicopter parents who are not allowing these kids to grow up and feel any type of consequence or responsibility, so they go off to college and they're irresponsible. So that's a long answer to say they should have started this material a lot younger. But I know that's not helpful.
Yeah, and it's really that's really great. I mean, it's really this deception that you're helping your kids, you're loving your kids by preventing them from failing.
Yeah.
And it's like so many things that don't sink in and lessons that aren't learned. So, from my own scripts, what I would say to the parent of the college student is, well, I told you so. But Doug wouldn't advise that, I don't think. All right. Robbie is from Atlanta, and he's the one that invited you to lunch. He is a student pastor. He has a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. He said, if you went back to that time in your ministry, what would you prioritize most as a parent, knowing what you know now?
Well, in ministry, I'm thankful that all 3 of my 20-somethings, they love Jesus and they're involved in the church and in ministry. So I'm grateful for that. I don't know if we do a lot different. I mean, early on, the challenge, I worked at a church where 3 of the pastors had affairs before Kathy and I ever had kids. And a lot of their kids were in my youth group. So I learned early on as a young youth worker that the church was my calling, but it was my job. And so, it went Jesus, marriage. I've kept that pretty much on target for 31 years of marriage. And so I'd say to my friend in Atlanta, anybody can do your job. Sorry, there's probably thousands that can do it better than you or me, but there's only one person who can be the father to those two children, and one person who can be married to your wife, and that's you. So jobs, ministries, those are expendable. As much as we don't want to believe that, but we've only got 936 weeks with those kids to be an intentional parent, and you put your parenting before your ministry.
936 weeks. That's an interesting way to put that. I mean, the other thing I discovered being in ministry, for quite a long time now, is it's amazing how many things I just thought were so essential that demanded my time in ministry. And looking back, it's like, wow, that was a complete waste of time. I shouldn't have been involved in that at all. So,
yeah. Well, and a lot of people in ministry are people pleasers. I mean, and so what we do is we say yes to the Mrs. Jones and Mr. Smith and all these tithers at church, and then by saying yes to them, we actually say no to our family. And then we wonder why ministry kids, graduate from the church and graduate from their faith, because
so
mom
we all
and dad,
need therapy,
they put ministry.
So anyway, all right. So the last question is this: what question should I have asked you today that I didn't ask?
That's, you got me. I don't know. Well, I'll tell you this. One of the questions is, because really what we're trying to do is we're trying to expose people to intentional parenting so that they might take a look at it, get people to do groups and things like that. My laboratory I did a 3-list, and in Southern California, August is vacation time. So school starts the first week of September. So, when do they let the family pastor guy speak? When everybody's gone. And in a mega church, 20% is a pretty intense number because it was just so need-meeting to parents. Now, again, 30 years working in the church, preach on the preaching team at 2 of the largest churches in Southern California. I know that when I preach a sermon, people walk by the door, oh, thank you, nice pastor, that's great. But I'm telling you, when you talk about marriage and you talk about parenting, the reception of those messages, it's because all of a sudden people are going, oh, you're helping me with what I'm struggling with every single day. So I found this content to be helpful, to be hopeful, practical, where it's not theory, it's not guilt-inducing. So however people, if they want to just steal it and reteach it, great. If you get them into small groups, even better, where, as you're a big fan of small groups, Alan, but, life change happens in the context of small groups. And to be in a journey together with other parents is great. Whether you teach the content in a Sunday school class or mentor somebody, I'm really proud of how practical it is, how lower shelf it is, and people say I can do that.
And that was what has drawn me to it. And I think we were actually at Saddleback when you did that series in August, way back when. So how about that? But no, that's the thing that attracted me to this was that the presentation is very engaging, and I'll say this with you on or off. But I think that it is practical and it's fairly easy to implement. And for some people, this is going to be a minor tune-up versus a major overhaul. For others, they're just going to have to, figure some things out and give some things up to embrace this. But I think the main thing is that it's going to have a broad appeal to parents. It meets a need. I mean, parents are just at a loss, and culture is accelerating to a point, well beyond. And the things that I think that I know of apps and things that are on the internet and whatever, I am way behind where my kids are at. And so I've just had to go to flat out spying, whether Apple agrees with that or not.
That's good. Well, and here's the reality, is for parents who are fearful of culture or peers, The number one predictor of health in a child is community. Whether they grew up in a Cambodian refugee camp or housing projects in New York, it is who they are surrounded with. And if they're surrounded with caring adults, if they're surrounded with grandparents who actually believe they're the most influential people in their life, the only time culture and media wins is what I call absence by default. When parents disengage, when they're too busy, when the kids get to the junior high stage where parents become passive aggressive with their parents, oh, you don't want to be with me, I don't want to be with you. And so they begin to back away. That's the only time when culture and media and these things that you're talking about have a chance of winning, is when parents disengage.
I get it. And even in the car, I listen to the station with my 14-year-old that he listens to, which is much different than my father when I was listening to, Kansas and Boston and Journey and Foreigner back in the day. It was more of, well, that's the devil's music. And I was like, well, devil's got something going. But anyway, I listen to songs with my son in the car, and then not trying to be the after school special, but I'm like, okay, now the song said this. Do you know what that is? And he's like, yeah. I said, would you explain that to me? Well, I'm embarrassed. Let's just talk about it and just get it out in the open. And, so that's one thing that I do out of a number of other things that I do that aren't so great. Anyway, well, Doug, go ahead.
That's the beauty of the pause button. What a great gift to be able to stop a show and go, what was that all about? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, no. And I think just to be open, because our culture, I mean, is very open. And they talk about things that, people used to whisper years ago. They talk about things very blatantly. And, I'm not encouraging parents to be obnoxious, but at least to be open with your children so that they know there's no question that you ask me. There's no subject that you want to discuss that I would ever be upset with you, that I would ever be embarrassed to discuss with you. Because if they're not talking about it with me, who are they getting it from?
It's good.
So, very good. Well, Doug, thank you so much for your time today. I'm going to share with the audience what's involved with the pilot, a little bit more about the intentional parenting materials. But I'm glad that you took time for us today. I know it's early out there on the West Coast, but certainly glad to have you. And I'm going to make this recording available to those who didn't join us today. But if everybody would just stay on, I know we only got the question windows. We can't really give you a round of applause, but I know everybody is in their heart in the office.
My final words, I'm just grateful for anybody who would take a gamble on this. I know we're looking for a bunch of pilot churches, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to help in any way. We last night, who has 65 small groups happening within her Christian school. Yeah, it's mostly moms, but they're bringing their husbands on Thursday night, and I'm getting the opportunity to speak to them on Thursday night. But it's working. People are seeing results from it and finding some help and hope. So thank you all for taking a look at it and being one of our pilot churches.
Yeah, one of the things I love about these churches is not only will this help the parents within their own churches, but all of these churches and pastors are influencers and are going to mention this to their friends and other churches that they know to get the word out as well. So again, thank you, Doug. We really appreciate it. And if you guys will hang on with me, let me tell you a little bit more about what's going on with the pilot. All right, so here are the details of this. Intentional parenting is made up of three different components. You can, maybe mix and match a little bit here. There's a DVD video. It's a 5-week study. So there are 2 actions on each week for 5 weeks in a row. So it's not a long study, which is very attractive to people. So 2 actions per week for 5 weeks. Videos on DVD. There's a workbook for each individual to go through. Because I don't know about you, but when I go through something new and I'm learning something, to sit through it once, have one exposure to it, sometimes it doesn't quite take. You need multiple exposures. And so I think, by people on their own and in the group spending time in the workbook, they're seeing it in their hands as well as seeing it on video, hearing it on video. They can go back and refer to things and, it'll stick a little deeper. Then there's also a discussion guide that's a download that groups can use or classes can use to have a discussion about about the 10 actions. So there's video, workbook, and then the discussion guide. Who is this for? This could be used with a spouse. It could be used with close friends. It could be used definitely in small groups. It could be used in parenting classes. So a variety of formats. I've had a few people that have said, well, I don't have that many small groups. Well, do you have classes? Or if you have people that say, you know what, I have some friends and they need material like this. So would it be okay for us to get together as a group of friends and do the study? And we wouldn't officially be a small group. We would kind of be off the books, if you will. To me, I think that's perfectly fine, because where Doug takes you in the video and the workbook that you have, the guidelines you have in the discussion guide, people aren't going to get out into la land. I mean, they're going to stick right with the path, and it's not something that as a pastor or director in your church that you're going to have to worry about too much, because they're going to be there for getting the principles and not creating any weirdness. So let me tell you a little bit about this pilot program. I haven't invited a lot of people into this because I only have 50 spots, and once those 50 spots are gone, then everybody can order materials and use it to their heart's content. But the 50 is kind of a special group. And so what we're asking churches to do is to commit using the curriculum with 10 groups or classes or off the books groups like I just talked about. You would register over at intentionalparenting.com/pilot, and I'll send that to you in an email, so you don't need to worry about that right now. And there's just a simple form that you send out. And so when you join the pilot, you essentially are ordering 10 group kits. So you have 10 DVDs and 100 workbooks that would be coming to you at a price of $1,100 plus the shipping. And the normal price would be $1,650. So you have a pretty good savings of $550 in this. And then you will be invoiced when your order is shipped. So you don't need to make a credit card payment when you sign up for the pilot. You'll receive an invoice in the mail, and then your bookkeeper at your church can send a check. Now, some people have said, what if I don't have $1,100 in my budget? Well, here's my thought. Is the first option would be charge the group members $10 each, and maybe the church pays for the DVDs and the shipping. Or the other option would be charge the group members $11 each, and that way if there are 10 people in the group, 1 times 10 is $10, covers the cost of the DVD, and maybe the church only pays for the shipping. And then the last option would be maybe to find someone who's concerned about parenting in your church and ask them to sponsor the pilot. But I mean, let's be realistic. $10 won't buy you 2 cups of coffee at Starbucks. And so for people that are in need, they want to do something for their children. They want to do something to have more tools in their toolbox as a parent, so they're not defaulting to quick fixes. They're not going back and parenting their kids the way that they were parented that didn't work out so great maybe. $10 is not a bad investment. And so I would challenge people, rather than just giving them curriculum, to ask them to actually purchase the workbook themselves. And like I said, maybe you have somebody that says, you know what, I want to get people in this. I want to get single moms in this, that maybe $10 is a sacrifice. And so, maybe it's option 3, and they'll just write the check and you're good to go. Others have asked, what if I don't have 10 groups? And so what I would say is this, and with groups, classes, off the books groups. And so what we've discussed is this. You want to go ahead and join the pilot, even if you just have 4 or 5 groups. And you want to purchase your 10 group kits now, because this is the only way that you can get the discount. And so after this pilot is closed, then you can purchase the curriculum off the website. You can still have your people pay for it, but it's going to be at a little bit of a higher price. So you want to go ahead and join the pilot now, purchase the 10 group kits, run as many groups as possible in April and May. And I will be asking for some feedback from your groups. We can discuss later what that apparatus is going to be. But run as many as you can in the spring, and then use the rest of the materials at another time. It's not going to go stale. It's not going to go bad. So if you purchase some in advance, I think that you're still going to be in good shape. And so, like I said, if you're interested in joining the pilot today, you can go to intentionalparenting.com/pilot, and there's just a simple web form you can fill out. and click submit, and then you'll be hearing from us shortly.